drag queen, well perhaps you're gay. Is there a point to all these fancy clothes? With all these buckles from your head down to your toes. Very simple, but I'm just another girl. It's not so easy, but I'm giving it a whirl. This is something that you're trying to prove. With all the makeup and the way you move. Are you looking for some sympathy? No, I'm trying to be the best girl I can be. Very simple, but I'm just another girl. Not so easy, but I'm giving it a whirl. Like my martini's dry. Cosmos I won't deny. Smoke those long cigarettes. Thank God I'm not dead yet. Done all these crazy things. Short of a wedding ring. Just a love girl.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Callista Solon, and you're watching nlcTrans. Tonight I'm here with my dear friend and co-host, Tara Alexander. And I want to apologize. We've been off the air for a couple of weeks. That was sort of partly my fault. 2 weeks ago, and I should have warned you about this, but it completely went right out of my head. 2 weeks ago, we had a panel at UConn, and so we weren't able to be here. And of course, so we went to UConn and hung out with a bunch of college students, and they infected me, and I got sick. So last week I was too sick to be here, and Tara stayed home and took care of me. So I apologize for that. But I'm like almost better now.
You sound more normal.
Yeah. So anyway, we've been off the air for a couple of weeks, and I'm sorry about that, but it was sort of unavoidable. But anyway, so we got a few things to talk about tonight, and we got some B-roll. We have some lovely B-roll later, so some more TED Talks, which Tara has put together for us. So we'll get to those in a bit. But there are some other things going on in the world, certainly, that we can talk about. It's been beautiful weather today. It was really, really nice. And the snow is almost gone. Yay! And spring's almost here. So I'm happy about that. I actually started planting, finally. I'm a month behind in my planting, but I started planting peppers over the past couple of days. So for those of you that don't know, I grow tropical peppers. And you basically have to start growing those under lights in like February. Because they need such a long growing season, but they make wonderful salsa. Anyway, so there's stuff going on. Certainly, we have a new pope to talk about. I know Tara is kind of excited about the new pope.
We have a new pope. Yes, we do.
Very cool. Sort of unexpected. Jorge Mario Bergoglio of Argentina. Is now.
Pope Francis the
First, yeah, very cool.
First American Pope, and the first Pope in history to take the name Francis after St. Francis of Assisi. Yeah, very cool.
Kind of a surprise. So that was interesting, and you just never know what's going to happen, you know. I was sort of expecting this to go on and on and on for a while, and so you came home and told me that we had a new Pope. I was surprised.
This afternoon that because you could sign up for the Pope Alerts.
The Pope Alerts,
yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes, there was a Catholic University Coalition nonprofit that was creating a website where you could go sign up for either a text message or an email alert, so that as soon as the white smoke went up and somebody was named, all the notifications would go out. And someone I work with, I was talking to him when his phone beeped, and he looked at his phone. And, we have Pope Jorge. It's like, well, that's not going to be his name. You know, he's going to take one of the. But yes, so Pope Francis.
Very cool.
Bishop of Rome.
Yeah, very cool. From Argentina.
Yeah,
and a cool place. I always wanted to visit Argentina, and will at some point. But yeah, wow.
Did you have info on him, or?
I just had the story from. I think this was from. Well, actually, I have two of them. I actually have the one from The Advocate, which is probably the one.
Oh, I don't have any at this point.
Which I will read to you. I actually have one also, I think, from NBC.
I only know what they were talking about on the drive home, which amounts to Pope Francis, when he was the Cardinal, I believe, of Argentina, was very much fought for the poor, was very concerned about the wealth disparity, very much considered capitalism for the sake of earning money sort of a sinful thing. Not that doing well and making money itself was a sin, but engaging in capitalism for the sole purpose of making money, without taking care of your workers, without taking care of your employees, without taking care of, it's your brother,
Sure.
God's creation, was not a good thing. Saw globalization as a real negative, a real hit to the poor. In fact, he himself reportedly did away with the chauffeur that he would normally have gotten and took the bus to work. He lived in a small, modest apartment. He didn't live in the Cardinal's house, the Cardinal's mansion. He frequently cooked his own meals. This is a very humble guy who's very concerned about sort of the social justice side of Catholicism that, frankly, I felt has been missing under our esteemed Pope Emeritus.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, and certainly I'm not a Catholic, but
you play one on TV.
But it's interesting anyway, and it's we've talked a little bit about this, obviously, as far as LGBT issues and stuff, maybe not quite as progressive as we'd like, but a good guy,
right,
by all accounts, and probably a step in the right direction.
He's definitely very much on the conservative line of the Roman Catholic Church when it comes to same-sex issues. When Argentina was working on marriage equality for the country, he came out rejecting it, saying that same-sex couples should not be allowed to marry. In fact, same-sex couples, according to him, should not be allowed to adopt children. And that's all kind of disappointing, but I also didn't expect the Roman Catholic Church to change 2,000 years of doctrine just because a new guy gets elected.
Sure.
But
baby steps.
But certainly, the Roman Catholic Church that I grew up with was definitely one that was concerned with social justice, that was concerned with, with schools and soup kitchens and homeless shelters, because it's our responsibility to help our fellow human beings. And that anyone that was exploiting or taking advantage of or abusing a person was committing a sin against God. And, it's nice to see that potentially. We don't know, we have to see. But certainly in his past, that social justice aspect has been a strong component of his life, his career as a Roman Catholic. So hopefully we will see more of it.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I think we can forgive him if he keeps the Pope mobile. But
well, and even in his speech today, he talked about he asked that all good people of the world pray for him to be a good and responsible Pope, and then stopped for like 30 seconds to receive the prayers of the masses, and joked that it took a long time to choose a pope. It seems like they had to go to the ends of the earth to find one. In this case, all the way to Argentina.
Yeah.
But so I think he's a very down to earth, humble guy. It seems that way, at least. We'll have to see it bear out. But
and a Spanish speaking.
As Spanish speaking, the first American pope, first South American pope, which was something that the sort of Catholic reformers were looking for, because 40% of the Roman Catholic Church is in Latin America. It's one of the fastest growing sections of the Roman Catholic Church. And to have a pope who speaks Spanish, who represents from Argentina that's sort of a Latin pope.
Yeah.
It goes a long way to sort of restoring some of the hope that the papacy will be about the Roman Catholic ideals and stuff, although I don't agree with all of them, but having been raised that way, I certainly have a very protective sense of
Sure.
it. As opposed to sort of the politics of the church, that it would be the ideals of the church will reign supreme, not the politics of the church reigning supreme. So we'll have to see, but
Yeah.
I was very excited, you're right.
Yeah. Well,
I also, Francis and Nicholas were my two favorite saints, so to have Francis be picked, and I think they were saying on the radio that he was reportedly quoted as saying that this is Saint Francis, not Pope Francis. That the Saint Francis was reportedly quoted as saying, however you could do this, that you should always preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words.
Yeah.
That's. I think that's a great comment. You should
Sure.
always be preaching the gospel, but only when necessary, use words.
Yeah.
Which is the whole live by example bit that
Sure.
I think so many times gets lost. But
Anyway, so kind of cool, and probably a relief for all those people standing out there in the rain. But yeah, I mean, it seems to me, I don't know, maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but it seemed like the last time it went on and on and on forever, and it seemed much quicker this time. But I probably wasn't paying all that much attention. I was busy with other things. But anyway, so that's kind of cool, and we'll see what happens. A new pope.
need a space pope.
A space pope?
You need a space pope.
A pope from space? Or a...
No, that's your Futurama reference. The space pope. Anyway.
Okay.
So, while you're looking, I'll talk about this briefly if you want.
Oh, the nurse. Yeah, go ahead.
This is a little bit old. We meant to talk about it last week, but we weren't here. This just caught me way off guard when I read this, so I'm sharing it in case anybody hasn't.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And it sort of plays on a segue from your Pope story. There was a woman, 87-year-old woman in California, in a California care home. Despite pleas from an emergency dispatcher, failed. The staff failed to help her. She was. Let's see. An unidentified woman rang the emergency services from a mobile phone to ask for paramedics to be sent to help an unconscious resident. She was a nurse herself, and that she was not permitted by her company to perform CPR on Mrs. Bayless, who was the 87-year-old woman who collapsed. The dispatcher pleaded with her, saying, "I understand if your boss is telling you you can't do it, but as a human being, is there anybody that's willing to help this lady and not let her die?" The nurse answered, "Not at this time."
Yeah.
She continued to say that basically, and we listened to this before coming, that and it's almost heartbreaking. The actual 911 call is the paramedics, they're on their way, but she's not breathing. You need to help her or she's not going to make it. She's dying. I understand you can't help her, but let me assure you, emergency medical services takes full responsibility for any of the actions performed under our direction. You're not liable. And if your boss still won't let you help her, then is there anyone else there that doesn't work for the company that could help her? Any resident, any visitor, any passerby? Can you run out to the street and flag someone down? I'll talk them through it. Please, isn't there anything that you can do to help this woman not die? No, we're not allowed to do that. And so and you can hear the dispatcher on the other line calling to the ambulance, going, "No, they're not going to touch her. They're just going to let her die."
Yeah,
and it's really interesting because as she says, "Yeah, give the phone to a passerby. This woman's not breathing enough. She is going to die if we don't get this started." So I mean, and as the story bears out, there's a policy in the company because they don't want to accept liability. They don't want to get sued for attempting it and failing it or something. And but of course, now the question is there some criminal negligence involved?
Sure.
You know, at a certain point, are you required to intervene?
Yeah, it seemed crazy to me, but
wow. So far, the investigation has revealed no criminal wrongdoing, but the probe is continuing. But it was just fascinating that you know, somebody would go to that length to avoid getting involved.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking to listen to.
Well, and I guess we should say, fortunately, before the dispatch person kept pleading with her until the ambulance crew, until the paramedics actually arrived. So she got help, and by all accounts, she did live, but might not have.
Yeah. It's a kind of a strange sign of the times, I suppose.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah,
I mean, we haven't rolled back the Good Samaritan laws, have we?
Yeah, it was difficult to listen to, but anyway, yeah, that was unfortunate. But hopefully, in the end, that all works out okay. But wow, yeah. Anyway, what else is going on? Well, let's see. We can talk a little bit about Minnesota.
Minnesota, okay.
Minnesota. I saw. I mean, you know, I know it's kind of far afield, but it's always good to see these kind of things. This was Minnesota. The Minnesota State Senate Judiciary Committee advanced a marriage equality bill to the full Senate with a 5-3 party line vote on Tuesday. The committee passed the bill after 3 hours of testimony, according to nlcNow.com. The House Civil Law Committee will finish hearing testimony on legislation Tuesday evening. Those submitting testimony included an 11-year-old girl who opposes marriage equality and Pastor David Wheeler, who has a gay nephew. According to Richard Karlborn, a campaign manager for Minnesotans United, there are less than 10 weeks for the legislature to pass a marriage equality bill. Well, we'll see. We sort of know how that goes.
Yeah.
But it's a good sign anyway. Minnesotans want to see our shared values represented in our state law, and those values simply do not include excluding some people from having the freedom to marry and pursue happiness just because of who they are, he said. So I mean, it's kind of I like to see things like that. It may not happen, but we know how this works. Sooner or later, it does happen.
Yes, right.
And it's a step in the right direction, and you never know. But hey, cool. It's a good thing. And there's also, I don't want to. I won't get too long-winded here, but New Zealand as well. You want to talk about going far afield. I don't think there's virtually nowhere except the South Pole that you can go that's farther than this. But New Zealand's a cool place. One of the places.
It's not quite the opposite side of the world from us.
Yeah, it's pretty far, but it would be a cool place to visit, I think. But anyway.
Yes, that's where where Wetta's shops are.
Yeah. Anyway, New Zealand lawmakers approved a bill on a second round that could legalize marriage equality, nearly ensuring its official passage in Parliament. Lawmakers approved the bill 77-44 in the second of 3 voting rounds before the bill is signed into law, according to the Associated Press. The third and final vote could be taken as early as next month. Very cool. So stuff is happening, here and around the world. Happy. I think it's a good thing. But I just one more thing quick, and then we can move on.
Okay.
But I thought this was interesting. You might like this. I don't know if you saw this or not. This was about ex-gay therapy group loses tax-exempt status. We've talked about this before. One of the nation's leading gay cure groups, the National Association for Research and Therapy of Homosexuality, has lost its tax-exempt status due to failure to file proper documentation for the past 3 years. Okay, I don't know how they manage that, but if you don't file your papers for 3 years, that's exactly what they do. They pull your status. This was announced by the Internal Revenue Service. It's a further blow to the largely discredited organization which purports to assist those who struggle with unwanted homosexuality, as its online mission statement says. Co-founder Joseph Nicolosi has claimed gay people wish to normalize pedophilia and spread HIV. Lovely.
No and no.
Yeah, and he has been accused of distorting the research of others to support NARTH's theories. That's their
National Association for
Research and NARTH.
NARTH.
In 2010, the group was the subject of scandal after one of its leaders, psychologist George Reckers, was found to be traveling with a paid male escort. Anyway, so they lost their tax-exempt status.
And this is an organization. I mean, Reckers is about the only person with a degree who actually has claimed evidence to support reparative therapy.
Yeah.
And his findings, his evidence has been discredited time and again over the last 20 years. But it takes finding him on vacation with a young male escort, and the escort's known to be gay.
Right.
For anyone to actually go, oh my God, that's horrific. So now they're not listening to him, not because he's wrong, but because he's embarrassing them.
Yeah. And he was wrong also. But
well, that's why we don't listen to him.
But yeah. Anyway, yeah, I remember that it was scandalous. But anyway, so apparently they're just maybe they're just kind of sort of fade away and into non-existence here. But
no, more than anything, they will probably turn themselves into a PAC and start funding campaigns.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's typically what happens.
But anyway, so they lost their tax-exempt status.
Well, that's kind of fun.
So I'm not, hey.
Well, if you'd like, I can bring it a little closer to home.
Okay.
This is actually for New London.
Yes.
A planning meeting for the first New London Pride Festival is being held, entitled New London Pride Festival, Painting a Mural of Diversity. Your help is needed to create this dynamic event on the city pier, in addition to a few smaller events throughout the year. Seeking committee members and community support to make this a successful event that is a part of New London's annual calendar. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, and allies are all encouraged to attend. Business owners and community leaders, please show your support as well. This introductory meeting is being held on March 27th from 6:15 to 7:30 in the New London Public Library, right downtown, in the community room. And there's a note that the doors lock at 7, so you have to be inside before 7. We're going to try to get a PSA up so that the information's available. You can also contact Constance Christophic if you know her.
And just about everybody does.
And just about everybody does. So that's March 27th, 6:15 in the community room of the New London Library. They're looking for volunteers to, committee members, community support to make it a successful event. They've got a core group started, and they're looking to expand their volunteer base to try and make it actually happen.
Yeah.
So New London Pride Festival on the city pier.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll get more information on that as we have it. So very cool. Anyway, so yes, you're right. That is much closer to home. Thank you.
Anything else? Or do you want to dive into the other piece?
The other piece. What? Oh, which other piece?
The TED Talks.
Oh, the TED Talks. Yes. Yeah, that's probably a good idea at this point. And if we have time, there are certainly other things we can talk about later. But yeah,
we won't.
Well, I know we tend to run out of time, but anyway.
Because this will probably take us, it's 18 minutes, so it'll take us right up to about 10 of, so we might have a few minutes. But the TED Talks today were actually came as a recommendation from a friend.
Yeah.
Well, one of them did was a comedian named Ruby Wax, who talks about the stigma of mental health, and so we've bookended it with a couple of other short TED Talks about people talking about mental health and the stigma around it.
Yeah.
So that's probably.
My name is Joshua Walters. I'm a performer. Whoop. But as far as being a performer, I'm also diagnosed bipolar. I reframe that as a positive because the crazier I get on stage, the more entertaining I become. When I was 16 in San Francisco, I had my breakthrough manic episode in which I thought I was Jesus Christ. Maybe you thought that was, scary, but actually, there's no amount of drugs you can take that can get you as high as if you think you're Jesus Christ. I was sent to a place, a psych ward. And in the psych ward, everyone is doing their own one-man show. There's no audience like this to justify their rehearsal time. They're just practicing. One day they'll get here. Now, when I got out, I was diagnosed, and I was given medications by a psychiatrist. Okay, Josh, why don't we give you some Zyprexa, okay? At least that's what it says on my pen. Some of you are in the field, I can see. I can feel your noise. The first half of high school was the struggle of the manic episode, and the second half was the over-medications of these drugs, where I was sleeping through high school. The second half was just one big nap, pretty much, in class. And when I got out, I had a choice. I could either deny my mental illness or embrace my mental skillness. There's a movement going on right now to reframe mental illness as a positive, at least the hypomanic edge part of it. Now, if you don't know what hypomania is, it's like an engine that's out of control, maybe a Ferrari engine with no brakes. Many of the speakers here, many of you in the audience, have that creative edge, if you know what I'm talking about. You're driven to do something that everyone has told you is impossible. And there's a book, John Gardner wrote this book called The Hypomanic Edge, in which Christopher Columbus and Ted Turner and Steve Jobs and all these business minds have this edge to compete. A different book was written not too long ago in the mid-90s called Touch with Fire by K. Redfield Jamison, in which it was looked at in a creative sense, in which Mozart and Beethoven and Van Gogh all had this manic depression that they were suffering with. Some of them committed suicide. So it wasn't all the good side of the illness. Now, recently, there's been development in this field, and there was an article written in the New York Times, September 2010, that stated, just manic enough. Just be manic enough, in which investors were looking for entrepreneurs that had this kind of spectrum. If you know what I'm talking about. Not maybe full bipolar, but they were in the bipolar spectrum. Where on one side, maybe you think you're Jesus. And on the other side, maybe they just make you a lot of money. Your call, your call. And everyone's somewhere in the middle. Everyone's somewhere in the middle. So maybe, you know, there's no such thing as crazy. And being diagnosed with a mental illness doesn't mean you're crazy. But maybe it just means you're more sensitive to what most people can't see or feel. Maybe. No one's really crazy, but everyone is just a little bit mad. How much depends on where you fall on the spectrum. How much depends on how lucky you are. Thank you.
One in 4 people suffer from some sort of mental illness. So if it was 1, 2, 3, 4, it's you, sir. You. Yeah, with the weird teeth. And you next to him. You know who you are. Actually, that whole row isn't right. That's not good. Hi, yeah, real bad. Don't even look at me. I am one of the 1 in 4. Thank you. I think I inherited from my mother, who I used to crawl around the house on all 4s. She had 2 sponges in her hand, and then she had 2 tied to her knees. My mother was completely absorbent. And she would crawl around behind me going, "Who brings footprints into a building?" So that was kind of a clue that things weren't right. So before I start, I would like to thank the makers of lamotrigine, sertraline, and reboxetine. Because without those 2 simple chemicals, I would not be vertical today. How did it start? My mental illness started, well, I'm not even going to talk about my mental illness. What am I going to talk about? Okay. I always dreamt that when I had my final breakdown, it would be because I had a deep Kafkaesque existentialist revelation, or that maybe Cate Blanchett would play me and she would win an Oscar for it. But that's not what happened. I had my breakdown during my daughter's sports day. There were all the parents sitting in a parking lot eating food out of the back of their car, only the English, eating their sausages. They love their sausages. Lord and Lady Rigor Mortis were nibbling on the tarmac. And then the gun went off and all the girlies started running and all the mummies went, "Run! Run, Chlamydia! Run! Run like the wind, Veruca! Run!" And all the girlies running, everybody, except for my daughter, who was just standing at the starting line, just waving, because she didn't know she was supposed to run. So I took to my bed for about a month, and when I woke up, I found I was institutionalized. And when I saw the other inmates, I realized that I had found my people, my tribe, because they became my only friends. They became my friends, because very few people that I knew, well, I wasn't sent a lot of cards or flowers. I mean, if I had had a broken leg or I was with child, I would have been inundated. But all I got was a couple phone calls telling me to perk up. Perk up, because I didn't think of that. Because, you know, the one thing that you get with this disease, this one comes with the package, is you get a real sense of shame. Because your friends go, "Oh, come on, show me the lumps, show me the x-rays," and of course you got nothing to show, so you're like really disgusted with yourself because you're thinking, "I'm not being carpet bombed, I don't live in a township." So you start to hear these abusive voices, but you don't hear one abusive voice, you hear about 100,000 abusive voices. Like if the devil had Tourette's, that's what it would sound like. But we all know in here, you know, there is no devil, there are no voices in your head. You know that when you have those abusive voices, all those little neurons get together, and in that little gap, you get a real toxic, I want to kill myself kind of chemical. And if you have that over and over again on a loop tape, you might have yourself depression. Oh, and that's not even the tip of the iceberg. If you get a little baby and you abuse it verbally, its little brain sends out chemicals that are so destructive that the little part of its brain that can tell good from bad just doesn't grow. So you might have yourself a homegrown psychotic. If a soldier sees his friend blown up, his brain goes into such high alarm that he can't actually put the experience into words, so he just feels the horror over and over again. So here's my question. My question is, how come when people have mental damage, it's always an active imagination? How come every other organ in your body can get sick and you get sympathy except the brain? I'd like to talk a little bit more about the brain because I know you like that here at TED. So if you just give me a minute here, okay. Okay, let me just say there's some good news. There is some good news. First of all, let me say we've come a long, long way. We started off as a teeny, teeny little one-celled amoeba, tiny, just sticking onto a rock, and now, voila, the brain. There we go. This little baby has a lot of horsepower. It comes completely conscious. It's got state-of-the-art lobes. We got the occipital lobe, so we can actually see the world. We got the temporal lobe, so we can actually hear the world. Here we got a little bit of long-term memory. So you know that night you want to forget when you got really drunk? Bye-bye, gone. So actually, it's filled with 100 billion neurons just zizzing away, electrically transmitting information. Zizzing, zizzing. I'm going to give you a little side view here. I don't know if you can get that here. So zizzing away, and and for every one, I know I drew this myself, thank you. For every one single neuron, you can actually have from 10,000 to 100,000 different connections or dendrites or whatever you want to call it. And every time you learn something or you have an experience, that bush grows, you know, that bush of information. Can you imagine every human being is carrying that equipment, even Paris Hilton? Go figure. But I got a little bad news for you, folks. I got some bad news. This isn't for the 1 in 4. This is for the 4 in 4. We are not equipped for the 21st century. Evolution did not prepare us for this. We just don't have the bandwidth. And for people who say, oh, they're having a nice day, they're perfectly fine, they're more insane than the rest of us. Because I'll show you where there might be a few glitches in evolution. Okay, let me just explain this to you. When we were ancient man, millions of years ago, and we suddenly felt threatened by a predator, okay? We would, thank you, I drew these myself. Thank you very much, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, we would fill up with our own adrenaline and our own cortisol, and then we'd kill or be killed, we'd eat or we'd be eaten, and then suddenly we'd defuel and we'd go back to normal. Okay, so the problem is nowadays with modern man, when we feel in danger, we still fill up with our own chemical, but because we can't kill traffic wardens or eat estate agents, the fuel just stays in our body over and over. So we're in a constant state of alarm, constant state. And here's another thing that happened. About 150,000 years ago, when language came online, we started to put words to this constant emergency. So it wasn't just, oh my God, there's a saber-toothed tiger, which could be. It was suddenly, oh my God, I didn't send the email. Oh my God, my thighs are too fat. Oh my God, everybody can see I'm stupid. I didn't get invited to the Christmas party. So you got this nagging loop tape that goes over and over again that drives you insane. So you see what the problem is? What once made you safe now drives you insane. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but somebody has to be. Your pets are happier than you are. So kitty cat, wow, happy, happy, happy. Human being, screwed. Completely and utterly. So screwed. But my point is, if we don't talk about this stuff and we don't learn how to deal with our lives, it's not going to be 1 in 4. It's going to be 4 in 4 who are really, really going to get ill in the upstairs department. And while we're at it, can we please stop the stigma? Thank you.
From all outward appearances, John had everything going for him. He had just signed the contract to sell his New York apartment at a 6-figure profit, and he'd only owned it for 5 years. The school where he graduated from with his master's had just offered him a teaching appointment, which meant not only a salary, but benefits for the first time in ages. And yet, despite everything going really well for John, he was struggling, fighting addiction and a gripping depression. On the night of June 11th, 2003, he climbed up to the edge of the fence on the Manhattan Bridge, and he leapt to the treacherous waters below. Miraculously, he lived. The fall shattered his right arm, broke every rib that he had, punctured his lung, and he drifted in and out of consciousness as he drifted down the East River, under the Brooklyn Bridge, and out into the pathway of the Staten Island Ferry, where passengers on the ferry heard his cries of pain, contacted the boat's captain, who contacted the Coast Guard, who fished him out of the East River and took him to Bellevue Hospital. And that's actually where our story begins. Because once John committed himself to putting his life back together, first physically, then emotionally, and then spiritually, he found that there were very few resources available to someone who has attempted to end their life in the way that he did. Research shows that 19 out of 20 people who attempt suicide will fail. But the people who fail are 37 times more likely to succeed the second time. This truly is an at-risk population with very few resources to support them. And what happens when people try to assemble themselves back into life, because of our taboos around suicide, we're not sure what to say, and so quite often we say nothing. And that furthers the isolation that people like John found themselves in. I know John's story very well because I'm John. And this is today the first time in any sort of public setting I've ever acknowledged the journey that I have been on. But after having lost a beloved teacher in 2006 and a good friend last year to suicide, and sitting last year at TED Active, I knew that I needed to step out of my silence and past my taboos to talk about an idea we're spreading. And that is that people who have made the difficult choice to come back to life need more resources and need our help. As the Trevor Project says, it gets better. It gets way better. And I'm choosing to come out of a totally different kind of closet today to encourage you, to urge you that if you are someone who has contemplated or attempted suicide, or you know somebody who has, talk about it. Get help. It's a conversation worth having and an idea worth spreading. Thank you.
Well, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that. Certainly, it's a subject that we've talked a lot about in the past, and certainly suicide, especially, in our with our background. We've talked a lot about that. We certainly talk about that, and we talk about that in panels and things too. But it's a scary thing, and.
Well, and it's one of those things that whether we've talked about it on the show or not, we have talked about it, and the notion that if you have and interestingly, your brain is one of the only organs in your body that responds to your environment. Your pancreas doesn't really change its operation because you're in a different environment. Some organs respond to stress, but that's about it. your brain actually responds to the input of the environment around you, as Ruby Wax was talking about, through childhood development, through the fears and the anxiety and the voices in your head, the satanic Tourette's in your head.
Yeah.
The crux of it is exactly as she said. Any other organ in your body, you go in to have it worked on, and people understand that. They feel sympathy for it. You can go see your your OBGYN. You can go see a chiropractor. You can go see a dentist. You can go see an optometrist. It's no big deal. In fact, you go see them on a regular basis. What's wrong in our culture that there's such a stigma about going to see a psychotherapist on a regular basis? Why haven't we developed the notion that, once every year, once every 6 months, once every 2 years, whatever the schedule is, you get a mental health checkup in addition to your annual physical checkup, your 6-month dental visit, your biannual eye visit. We don't have a notion of getting a mental health checkup. There's still, and a lot of people I've met individually, don't have such stigma around it.
Sure.
Anyone that's experienced it or has a family member that's experienced it, I think certainly understands better. But culturally, asking for help is a really challenging thing for a lot of people. And it's not even so much admitting you can't do it on your own, as it would just be easier with help. And this notion that it shows a weakness to reach out for a professional. Yet no one would suggest you try to set your own broken bone.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where today's TED Talks come from, was my own experiences with mental illness and suicide, and the notion. I mean, we've seen in our relationship what kind of difference it can make.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that I want to help make sure is talked about, is out there, is not we're not silent about.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. It is sort of amazing. The whole mental health thing, and it is, there's a serious stigma. Certainly, as a transsexual, we have as a group, we have an extremely high rate of suicide, and so we're all sort of acutely aware of that. And I can honestly say that there were times that I had suicidal thoughts. I grew up with mental illness. I mean, I can, so I mean, it's sort of familiar for me. I mean, I interrupted my mother trying to commit suicide when I was 4, and she tried again when I was about 8 and wound up institutionalized for some time. And so I spent a lot of time hanging honestly, I spent a lot of time as a small child hanging around a place called Undercliff, which is still there, but it's not the same kind of a facility anymore. But it was place. It was a mental institution, and I spent a lot of time hanging out there, and I actually made a lot of friends there. And it was an interesting place. But
and part of the point even of a mental institution, right, is there's the stigma like, okay, this person's crazy, we put them in there and lock the door. But that's not what the institution, being institutionalized, is supposed to be about. As a couple of them said, I spent time in the institution and got better.
Yeah.
Just like you go to a physical therapist, you have inpatient treatment. You get the help. You work through the issues. There's a lot of talk of like PTSD with the returning soldiers and everything, and traumatic brain injury, and that's all wrapped up, I believe, in this cultural stigma we have about dealing with mental issues. Whether it's physical brain damage or whether it's emotional trauma or social programming issues, mental health. We only recently got a mental health parity bill passed that said, from an insurance standpoint, you have to treat it the same.
Yeah.
So it was only in the last couple of years that we actually had any legal recognition that a mental health issue wasn't something entirely different.
Right.
It didn't just mean you were crazy. And now that we have these debates about gun control and mental health issues and who should be allowed to, you know, there's a lot of places where the stigma of mental illness or any kind of brain injury come into play, and we have to be very careful about how we approach it, that we don't approach it from a point of stigma, but that we approach it from a point of education, educated opinions.
Yeah. And on that note, we are actually out of time. So we will leave you now. But we will, you know, barring more sickness or
we'll
blizzards,
be here next
blizzards,
week.
I don't think we're going to have any more blizzards, hopefully. But and so hopefully we will actually be back next week.
Yes,
I'm quite sure we will. But anyway, so thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we will see you again in a week. Bye bye.